Hello, everybody. You're reading with Jimmy. This is chapter 4 of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Chapter 4 is titled The Rabbit Sends in a Little Bill. It was the white rabbit trotting slowly back again and looking anxiously about as it went, as if it had lost something. And she heard it muttering to itself, the Duchess, oh my dear paws, oh my fur and whiskers. She's going to get me executed as sure as ferrets are ferrets. Where can I have dropped them, I wonder? Alice guessed in a moment that it was looking for Fan and the pair of white kid gloves, and she very good-naturedly began hunting about for them. But they were nowhere to be seen. Everything seemed to have changed since her swim in the pool, and the great hall with the great table and the little door. They'd completely vanished. Completely. Very soon the rabbit noticed Alice as it went hunting about and called out to her in an angry tone, "Why, Marianne, what are you doing out here? Run home this moment and fetch me a pair of gloves and a fan. Quick, now!" Alice was so much frightened that she ran off at once in the direction it pointed, without even trying to explain the mistake it had made. "He took me for his housemaid," she said to herself as she ran. "How surprised he'll be when he finds out who I am. But I'd better take him his fans and gloves. I'd better take him his fans and gloves. That is, if I can find them." And as she said this, she came upon a neat little house, on the door of which was a bright brass plate with the name W. Rabbit engraved on it. She went in without knocking and hurried upstairs, in a great fear lest that she should meet the real Marianne and be turned out of the house before she'd found the fan and the gloves. "How queer it seems," Alice said to herself, "to be going messages for a rabbit. I suppose Diana will be sending me on messages next." She began fancying the sort of thing that would happen. "Miss Alice, come here directly and get ready for your walk." "Coming in a minute, nurse. But I've got to watch this mouse hole until Diana comes back and see that the mouse doesn't get out." Only I don't think, Alice went on, that they'd let Diana stop in the house if it began ordering people around like that. By this time she had found her way into a tidy little room, with a table in the window, and on it, she had hoped, was a fan and 2 or 3 pairs of tiny white kid gloves. She took up the fan and a pair of the gloves, and was just about to leave the room when her eye fell upon a little bottle that stood near the looking-glass. There was no label on it this time with the words "drink me," but nevertheless she uncorked it and put it to her lips. "I know something interesting is sure to happen," she said to herself, "whenever I eat or drink anything, so I'll just see what this bottle does. Oh, I do hope it'll make me grow large again, for I'm really quite tired of being such a tiny little thing." It did so indeed. So much sooner than she would have expected. Before she had drunk half the bottle, she found her head pressing against the ceiling, and she had to stoop to save her neck from being broken. She hastily put the bottle down, saying to herself, "That's quite enough. I hope I shan't grow any more. As it is, I can't get out the door. I do wish I didn't drink quite so much." Alas, it was too late to wish for that. She went on growing and growing, and very soon had to kneel down on the floor. And in another minute, there was not even room for this. And she tried the effect of lying down on one elbow against the door and the other arm curled around her head. Still, she went on growing. And at last, as a last resource, she put one of her arms out the window and one foot up the chimney and said to herself, "Now I can do no more. Whatever happens, what will become of me?" Luckily for Alice, the little magic bottle had now had its full effect, and she didn't grow any larger. Still, it was very uncomfortable, as there seemed to be no part of chance of her ever getting out of that room again. No wonder she felt unhappy. It was much pleasanter at home, thought poor Alice, when one wasn't growing larger and smaller and being ordered about by mice and rabbits. I almost wish I hadn't gone down that rabbit hole. And yet, and yet, it's rather curious, this sort of life. I wonder what can have happened to me. When I used to read fairy tales, I fancied that kind of thing never happened. And now, here I am in the middle of one. There ought to be a book written about me. There ought. When I grow up, I'll write one. But I'm grown up now, she added in a sorrowful tone. At least there's no room to grow up anymore here. But then, thought Alice, shall I never get any older than I am now? Well, that'll be a comfort one way, never to be an old woman. But then, always to have lessons to learn. Oh, I shouldn't like that. You foolish Alice, she answered to herself. How can you learn lessons in here? There's hardly any room for you, and there's certainly no room for any lesson books. So she went on, taking first one side and then the other, and making quite a conversation of it altogether. But after a few minutes, she heard a voice outside and stopped to listen. Marianne, Marianne, said the voice, fetch my gloves this moment. Then came a little pattering of feet on the stairs. Alice knew that it was the rabbit coming back to look for her, and she trembled till she shook the house, quite forgetting that she was now 1,000 times larger than the rabbit and had no reason to be afraid of it. Presently, the rabbit came to the door and tried to open it, but as the door opened inward and Alice's elbow was pressed hard against it, that attempt proved a failure. Alice heard it say to itself, then I'll go around and get in at the window. That you won't, thought Alice, and after waiting till she fancied she heard the rabbit just outside the window, she suddenly spread out her hand and made a snatch in the air. She didn't get a hold of anything, but she heard a little shriek and a fall and a crash of broken glass, from which she concluded that it was just possible that it had fallen into a cucumber frame or something of the sort. Next came an angry voice. It was the rabbit's. Pat, Pat, where are you? And then a voice that she had never heard before. Sure that I'm here, digging for apples, Your Honor. Digging for apples, indeed, said the rabbit angrily. Here, come here and help me out of this. Sounds of more broken glass. Now tell me, Pat, what's that in the window? Sure, it's an arm, Your Honor. He pronounced it arm. An arm? You goose, whoever saw that size of an arm? What, it fills the whole window. Or sure it does, Your Honor, but it's an arm for all that. It's got no business there, at any rate. Go, take it away. There was a long silence after this, and Alice could only hear whispers now and then. Such as, sure, I don't like it, Your Honor, at all. Do as I tell you, you coward. And at last she spread out her hand again and made another snatch in the air. This time there were two little shrieks and more sounds of broken glass. What a number of cucumber frames there must be, thought Alice. I wonder what they'll do next. As for pulling me out of the window, I only wish they could. I'm sure I don't want to stay here any longer. She waited for some time without hearing anything more. At last, the rumbling of a little cartwheels, and she heard the sound of a good many voices, all talking together. She made out the words. Where's the other ladder? Why, I hadn't to bring this one, but Bill's got the other one. Bill, fetch it here, lad. Here, put it against this corner. No, tie them together first. They don't reach half as high enough yet. Oh, they'll do well enough. Don't be particular. Here, Bill, catch hold of this rope. Will the rope bear? Mind, that loose slate. Oh, it's coming down. Heads up, heads below. A loud crash. Now, who did that? It was Bill, I fancy. Who's to go down the chimney? Nay, I shan't. You do it. That I won't do then. Bill's got to go down. Here, Bill. The master says you've got to go down to the chimney. Go down that chimney. Oh, so Bill's got to come down the chimney, has he? Said Alice to herself. Why, they seem to put everything upon Bill. I wouldn't be in Bill's place for a good deal. This fireplace is narrow, to be sure, but I think I can kick a little. She drew her foot as far down the chimney as she could and waited till she heard a little animal. She couldn't guess what sort of animal it was, scratching and scrambling down the chimney close to her, and then saying to herself, "This is Bill." She gave a sharp kick, one sharp kick, and waited to see what would happen next. The first thing she heard was a general chorus of, "There goes Bill." Then the rabbit's voice alone, "Catch him, you by the hedge." Then silence. Then another confusion of voices. "Hold his head up. Brandy now, don't choke him. How was it, old fellow? What happened to you? Tell us about it." Last came a little feeble squeaking voice. "That's Bill," thought Alice. Well, I hardly know. No more, thank ye. I'm better now. But I'm a deal too flustered to tell you. All I know is something comes at me like a jack-in-the-box, and up I go like a rocket." "So you did, old fellow," said the others. "We must burn the house down," said the rabbit. Alice came out loud. She called out loud as she could, "If you do, I'll set Diana on you." There was dead silence instantly. And Alice thought to herself, "I wonder what they will do. If they had any sense, they'd take the roof off." After a minute or two, they began moving around again, and Alice heard the rabbit say, "A barrel full will do, to begin with." A barrel full of what? Thought Alice. But she had not long to doubt, for the next moment a shower of little pebbles came rattling in at the window, and some of them hit her in the face. "I'll put a stop to this," she said to herself, and shouted out, "You better not do that again," which produced another dead silence. Alice noticed with some surprise that the pebbles were all turning into little cakes. As they lay on the floor, and a bright idea came into her head. If I eat one of these cakes," she thought, "it's sure to make some change in my size, and as it can't possibly make me larger, it must make me smaller, I suppose." So she swallowed one of the cakes and was delighted to see that it began shrinking. She began shrinking directly. As soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house and found a quiet little crowd of little animals and birds waiting outside. The poor little lizard, Bill, was in the middle, being held up by two guinea pigs who were giving it something out of a bottle. They all made a rush at Alice the moment she appeared, but she ran off as hard as she could and soon found herself safe in the thick wood. "The first thing I've got to do," said Alice to herself as she wandered around the wood, "is to grow to my right size again. And the second thing is to find my way into that lovely garden. I think that will be the best plan." It sounded like an excellent plan, no doubt, and very neatly and simply arranged. The only difficulty was that she had not the smallest idea how to set about it. And while she was peering about anxiously about the trees, a little sharp bark just over her head made her look up in a great hurry. An enormous puppy was looking down at her with large round eyes, and feebly stretching out one paw trying to touch her. "Poor little thing," said Alice in a coaxing voice, and she tried hard to whistle at it, but she was terribly frightened all the time, as she thought that it might be hungry, in which case it was very likely to eat her in spite of her coaxing. Hardly knowing what she did, she picked up a little stick and held it out to the puppy, whereupon the puppy jumped into the air off all its feet at once with a yelp of delight and rushed at the stick and made believe to worry it. Then Alice dodged behind a great thistle to keep herself from being run over. And at the moment she appeared on the other side, the puppy made another rush at the stick and then tumbled head over heels in its hurry to get hold of it. And then Alice, thinking that it was very likely having a game of play with a cart horse and experiencing every moment to be trampled under its feet, ran around the thistle again, and the puppy began a series of short charges at the stick, running a little way forwards at a time, and then back, forward and back, and barking hoarsely all the while, till at last it sat down a good way off, panting, and its tongue hanging out of its mouth, and its great eyes half shut. This seemed to Alice a good opportunity for making her escape, so she set off at once and ran till she was quite tired and out of breath. And the puppy's bark sounded quite faint in the distance. And yet, what a dear puppy it was, said Alice. And she leaned over the buttercup to rest herself and fanned herself with one of the leaves. I should have liked to teaching it tricks very much, if only I'd been the right size to do it. Oh dear, I'd never forgotten what I've got to grow up again. I nearly forgotten I've got to grow up again, pardon me. Let me see. How is it to be managed? I suppose I ought to eat or drink something or another, but the question is what? The great question was certainly what. The great question certainly was what. Alice looked around her at all the flowers and blades of grass, but she couldn't see anything that looked like the right thing to eat or drink under the circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, but the same height as herself. And when she had looked under it, on both sides of it, behind it, it occurred to her that she might as well look and see what was on top of it. So she stretched herself up on her tiptoe and peeped over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes immediately met those of a large blue caterpillar that was sitting on top with its arms folded, quietly smoking a long hookah and taking not the smallest notice of her or anything else. Thank you for visiting. That was chapter 4 of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. The title of the chapter was The Rabbit Sends in a Little Bill. There is several pages of analysis that follow this, but I thank you for listening and reading along with Jimmy. This is Jimmy, and my email address is jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com, jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. Send me an email with your thoughts, or if you'd like to hear another classic book, send me that too. Thank you very much.